Hi, I'm Paula Garrett-Rucks from Georgia State University in Atlanta, and I would like to thank you for coming today to listen to my video abstract on a discussion-based online approach to fostering deep cultural inquiry in an introductory language course in the summer volume of Foreign Language Annals 2013. I'm an assistant professor at Georgia State University. I teach foreign language teaching methods to K through 12 instructors, and I also teach second language acquisition theory and methods courses, as well as introductory French courses. And prior to becoming a university professor, I taught French at a high school in San Diego, California for 5 years. And I've also taught for about 15 years at the college level and community college level, always introductory language courses, French language courses. And so when I taught in the late 90s in high school, the issue of cultural instruction in my classroom was very important to me, particularly when the standards came out. It resonated well with me, the importance of perspectives when teaching cultural practices and products to my students. And I hadn't had any foreign language teaching methods courses prior to being in the classroom at this time period, and I didn't teach in the target language. But when I understood the ACTFL position statement to teach 90% in the target language, I started implementing that into my high school course and realized the linguistic gains were tremendous. Yet I found myself struggling with how to get to deeper levels of culture while maintaining the target language, because I found when I switched back to English to teach deeper cultural instruction that it was hard to come back to the target language, and it was something that I struggled with. And so as I went to pursue my graduate studies and consulted the literature on cultural instruction, I found I was not alone to suffer from this conundrum between, or the struggle between how to get to deeper cultural instruction with learners' limited linguistic mastery at introductory levels of instruction. And the more I understood about intercultural competence and cultural understanding, I came to understand the importance of learners finding their third place, as Cramch calls it, where they negotiate cultural differences between their own cultural worldviews and the target cultural worldviews. And in a Vygotskian theoretical perspective, I found that learners really needed their first language, particularly at introductory levels of instructions, to mediate their thoughts as they came to understand the target culture. So that was the background that informed my research. Particularly, I'm also concerned with Americans in general and foreign language instruction when you see from the 2007 MLA survey that less than 2% of students actually are enrolled in higher level foreign language classes where they get to the point where they have the linguistic mastery to get to deeper levels of discussions about cultural differences. And that only 12% of American college students did study abroad, where they would have that personal connection of interacting with target language members to understand their perspectives better. And that apparently to date only 1% of students spend a year. Most of the 12% is short-term exchanges. So it's quite alarming that the majority of Americans aren't having access to deep cultural reflection at introductory levels of foreign language instruction when there's target language use. So to examine an alternative way to get to these deeper levels of thinking about cultural differences, I decided to remove the use of the L1 and classroom discussions in English outside of the classroom to bring to an online environment where students would discuss cultural topics on Blackboard course management system in 5-week discussions per cultural topic over the course of a 16-week semester. And the two cultural discussions that I analyzed to look at students' changes in their intercultural competence were the cultural topics of French greetings with la bise, handshaking, embracing, and smiling was the first 5-week discussion, and the second 5-week discussion was about education and how cultural differences between French K through 12 education, preparing learners for university versus United States perspectives. So in these discussions, I had learners access materials on their own that I had selected, and the 5-week discussions were broken down into 2 phases. For the first phase, I had students access Carnegie Mellon's Open Learning Initiative, where it was explicit cultural instruction. So for greetings, it essentially said, French people think this about smiling. They have more reserved smiling practices than Americans, but yet among friends, they smile freely. And I also had native speaker perspectives taken from a Yahoo discussion board, where there were, and I tried to select diverse perspectives where there were people who were for la bise and who liked smiling, and people who thought that smiling should be more reserved, or people who thought la bise was too personal. And that was for phase 1. It was all print material. So for week 1, students accessed these resources. For week 2, in an attempt to develop a discussion, I told the students that they had to make, week 1 was just 1 posting, 50 words minimum, of how they interpreted, basically using the comparison standard 4.2, how did they compare what they read in this material to how they perceived cultural practices in the United States, like smiling, for example, in the United States. And then week 2, they were responsible for replying to 2 of their peers' postings in a minimum of 50 words, where I stated they should explicitly agree or disagree with their peers. And then week 3, they accessed interviews that I pre-recorded with 4 different French informants, where they expressed their own opinions about French cultural practices of greeting and French education, and how they interpreted American practices while they were here in the United States. So for week 3, students responded to the French informants and gave their response to that. And then for week 4, they had to respond to 2 peers' postings. In week 5, they reflected on all of the postings and materials that were provided to them to give them their final understanding of the perspectives behind these cultural practices. So each phase, at the end of this 10-week discussion, 5 weeks about greetings, 5 weeks about education, I had over 100 pages of transcripts, and I identified the most salient cultural practice, and then I assessed students based on what they had to say about smiling practices, which was the most salient cultural practice in discussion 1, and about essentially tracking, picking a career choice well in junior high, high school, in the French school system. And each time a student made a posting where they mentioned those, I assessed their intercultural competence based on Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. And I chose this model because it showed incremental growth, and I was trying to look at growth over a short period of time with my students. And interestingly, what I found was consistently for phase 1, after exposure to the print material, students, the majority of students, 80% or higher, had ethnocentric perspectives where they thought, well, you know, what is this bise, and why is it that French people can kiss doing la bise, but they are hesitant to smile? But yet, after they heard the French informants give their perspective of, well, you know, we say, for example, one informant said, you know, I like the American smile. It represents America's warmth, but sometimes it can be too big and too much, maybe too aggressive, like the Colgate smile. And after exposure to hearing the French informant's perspectives of not only their own cultural practices, but their perspectives toward the American cultural practices, students had this shift where it was considerably, almost a direct shift, where the majority of students left their ethnocentric thinking and started to show signs of intercultural sensitivity. So, to sum it up, what seemed to be most helpful for students in both of the discussions was the French informant videos. And I interviewed the majority of the students at the end of the semester and asked them, what did you find most influential on your perspectives towards French cultural practices, of the 3 different materials, of the whether it was either the authentic text in print, or the explicit cultural instruction, or the French videotapes of the French informants. And students made these wonderful comments. This is worth a moment to cite them. Students said things like the interviews were much more interesting, partly because we could get these people's personalities that came across. And they said when you're reading, you know, you don't see the person being interviewed, you don't see their reactions, you don't see what they're saying, you get a better idea of what people are really thinking. And I remember one student, I don't cite it in this article, but one student said in particular the gestures really made her feel more comfortable about what the French informant was trying to say, where she said, oh, for example, I like the American smiling practices, but, you know, sometimes it can be a bit much. And I think through that gesture, students could really understand, there is a cultural difference. There's something more than just what they could have accessed from having read it in print. So another student said the videos were more effective with memory retention over translated text. Just reading it has more room for error. And only one student mentioned that she liked having the authentic text in both. Actually, he said that he liked the authentic text because he could read them in French and then read them in English. I provided English translations of all the materials to students. So that comes to the discussion of what are the most important elements in cultural instruction. According to the literature, it's discussions, but how do you have conducive discussions in introductory level foreign language classes when adhering to target language instruction? And it's a challenge, but yet research continually shows the importance of students to discuss things, to explore their own ideas. Yet in addition to that, the input, the target member perspectives from a reliable source, it seemed to be very important to them. And having French informants come into classrooms, it's often difficult because you're not sure what they're going to say. Coordinating schedules can be difficult. And according to research too, you don't want to just have one French voice because students, it's difficult to break that monolithic image that students have that perpetuates stereotypes when there's only one French informant. So in conclusion, I think the use of pre-recorded videotapes, ideally with the instructor or somebody else who the students have confidence in, or who they can recognize to be current, to know that the information they're being given is, because culture changes so much and students have a sense of that it's current, and that multiple sources is a critical point, and having the videos so that they can really see the gestures and get a sense to judge for themselves what the French informant perspectives are. And in addition to that, I think hearing French informant perspectives about American cultural practices, seeing through the eyes of the others, not only their culture but also our own, I think helps students really develop this third place that seems to be crucial to developing the type of intercultural skills that are deemed so necessary in today's increasingly globalized world. So, thank you for your time and your questions. Your time and your attention. If you have any future questions, please email me at prucks@gsu.edu. Thank you.